Hello and welcome, one and all. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, folks. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome to our halftime show, we called it. Given that we just passed the halfway mark of 2024, we want to discuss the cigar year, at least half of the year in review here with a seasoned industry expert panel. There's a bit of a novelty this week. I would love to welcome everybody joining us on the YouTube live stream because from this week onwards, we'll be streaming the Light 'em Up Lounge directly to our YouTube channel instead of the Facebook live stream. We're still posting the link on Facebook, of course, and I hope that everybody made a smooth transition and switch of platforms together with us. We actually did stream to YouTube before with our Puro Sabor live coverage a couple years ago during the pandemic, but we thought it's time to move back to old YouTube and have our lounge live featured there. So everybody joining us over there, thanks for joining us. Please put your comments, your thoughts, your questions for our panel into the comment section, into the chat over there, and we'll happily bring forward your questions. We'll still have a look over on Facebook if everybody has comments and thoughts over there. But without further ado, let's get to it. Let's talk cigars with our panel for today. First of all, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show and at the same time also wholeheartedly congratulate Mr. Joshua Habersky, who, well, just recently has been appointed and named the executive director of the Premium Cigar Association, the PCA. Josh, it's a privilege to have you. Congratulations on your new role. You've been an integral part of the evolution of the PCA over the last couple of years, together with Scott and the team, of course. But now in your new role, thumbs up, congratulations, all the very best for the path and the journey ahead. And thank you very much for joining us today on the panel.
Thank you, Reinhard. I really appreciate you inviting me and joining me. This is my first interview in the new role. We got a lot of exciting things going on here. It's no shortage of tasks to do across all departments. We're getting ready to do a site visit in New Orleans. We have the Republican and Democratic conventions coming up for cigar events. We're also doing one for state legislators in Louisville, Kentucky, where they have their big conference. So we're going around. Our membership folks in the U.S. will be visiting California, Massachusetts, a variety of different states over the summer, directly engaging with retailers. And we're going to be launching some new programs, new member benefits, some stuff also outside of the United States, which we're very excited about. I think we've in the interim status, we had to really work on working on the projects that Scott was working on, making sure that there was no downtime, and our team has really stepped up. I believe next week or the week after, we're going to be making a new hire, so an additional hire in the trade show team, which we'll be announcing. So really focusing on creating the best possible experience for the trade show in New Orleans and making it more sociable. I think with New Orleans, we had a release yesterday talking about places where you can smoke, but also our intention of making it more of a social networking experience. And because of the change of cities, it's a lot more affordable in New Orleans versus some other areas. So we have a lot of tricks up our sleeve and some good things for the industry. But holistically, all of our member benefits, even outside of the trade show and outside of advocacy, this is going to be a very busy summer for our team.
It certainly sounds like it. And yeah, that gives us plenty of stuff to talk about. And of course, the first half year of 2024 was largely dominated by the change of dates for the PCA trade show. So we'll talk about all of this. But allow me to introduce the other guests on our panel. Here with us is Jeff Greiner joining us from Tulsa. Jeff, what a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining us and welcome to Light 'em Up, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the invite, my friends. Good to finally be on here. See all the other guys up there too.
Well, one of our most loyal fellows, regulars, and friends of the show, family, I have to say, really, the professor, the one and only Jose. Welcome back.
It's been a while with all the traveling. I just came back from DC, Virginia, Maryland, and New Jersey. Before that, I was in Germany. Before that, I was in Spain. But it's great to see Joshua here, but also Jeff, which I've known for many years, which I think is one of the most knowledgeable and really hardcore smokers out there. I've never liked him a lot, but got to deal with him.
Well, we also have the legend with us. Just joined us a few moments ago, live from Capital Cigar over in Bethesda. What a privilege. Good to see you again. George, proudly wearing the colors, proudly wearing the hat. The one and only Mr. George Brightman. Welcome.
Yeah, lucky for everybody else, there is one and only, right? Can you imagine what a terror it would be if I had a twin? Greetings to everybody, and great to hear from Josh to kick things off. Needless to say, I think everybody is looking forward to New Orleans as a spot for the show. Not to jump ahead in terms of conversation, I'll let you manage all of that. But New Orleans has always been a spot for special things to happen, and I hope that our past record doesn't hurt us, because we were the last people in New Orleans, the last convention in that building before Katrina struck. So hopefully this time good fortune smiles on New Orleans as opposed to smiting it with another 100-year storm.
Thank you, one and all, for joining us here on the panel. It's really a privilege to have such a seasoned panel here. Josh already gave us a bit of an introduction and sort of led into the whole conversation. And as I mentioned, the change of dates for the PCA trade show was definitely something that shuffled everybody's cigar year calendar a little bit. Long term, I would say definitely for the better. But it's pretty obvious that 2024 is a bit of a transition period and an adjustment year for everybody. Jeff, you being on the retail side of things, how has the change of dates for the trade show affected you and your business? And what do you see going forward as the positive results and outcomes of the change of dates, particularly when it comes to sales cycles and how that also translates to purchasing behavior and ultimately how it translates to the consumer?
Yeah, definitely it's going to be beneficial. I think most of us have wanted the trade show earlier in the year. I'm glad it's happening. So I think even next year being April will be even better, but it helps us to get stocked up in time for the busy season instead of being right in the busy season. The challenge I think was for some of the regions of the country that are maybe still slower during the January, February blues, maybe weren't able to spend as much as they normally would in July, but I think next year will be even better. So I was excited to see it earlier in the year. But yeah, definitely for stock reasons, more time for releases to come out instead of getting everything at once in fall. It's nice to have a little bit more spread. The customers like it too when there's a little bit more bigger interval in between releases that way, because it's always what's new, and when everything comes in a couple of months, that wears off quick. So it's definitely a good thing with the trade show being earlier in the year. So
What's your view on sort of the sentiment amongst the retail community in the US at the moment in general? We've just passed the halfway mark of 2024, as I said. We've just concluded the first two quarters of the year. The importation numbers of cigars are still very strong when it comes to cigars being imported into the United States. So after a record-breaking year last year, it seems like we were very much on track with the numbers, even though there might be a slight downward correction, but still looking very, very positive. At the same time, I have to admit that during certain conversations, I almost sense like there's a bit of a not hesitancy, but people are a bit more cautious when it comes to predictions for the next couple of months, when it comes to purchasing behavior and stocking up on things. Um, does that sort of mirror or resemble what you're experiencing in the market at the moment, or would you have a different perspective on this?
I think, talking with a lot of my reps that cover Texas as well, which is a huge territory, I think a lot of stores are still doing very good. There are some that are more flat. A lot of that just falls on the retailer to do a good job. There's a lot of competition out there, so you have to up your game. But the number of cigar smokers has steadily increased since COVID. So we're personally speaking, our store's doing great. It's another great year so far for us. The weird thing with COVID is January and February were always the slow points, and they've been super busy months for us now, which is great. I'm not used to that. So, yeah, I think we'll see the continued steady trend as far as what we're at right now.
George, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, you've seen it all, you've heard it all, and you've experienced it all from the first boom way back in the 90s, the bust thereafter, and as we all know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. Do you see any writings on the wall, or what's your current perception of where we're at here in 2024?
Well, first of all, you left out one of the other, 50 years means that I was also looking at the explosion of manufacturers in the, as a result of the Cuban diaspora after the revolution. So there's, I watched the upcycle, the explosion of things that happened in the 70s, who started blossoming in the 60s, but the 70s really saw an extraordinary shift. And then the 80s introduced the world to the Dominican Republic as a manufacturing center. I would say probably one of the big outcomes of the 90s was the explosion of Nicaragua into the marketplace, whereas before it had been, a little source of boutique product. So regarding, I think the things that Jeff said are all spot on. Let's be aware of one thing. Anytime you have change, in other words, you alter the cycle of when retailers go to the trade show and get shot in the arm in terms of new information, new motivation, maybe new inspiration from fellow retailers or even their vendors about trends. And then the consumers, who are now much, much smarter than they ever have been and much more involved than they ever have been, thanks to, cigar social media and things like this show. But they're much, and this is worldwide, not just here in the States. The amount of involvement of consumers, in other words, the pull that they create for the new things, they were always, aligned with a late summer show and the early fall arrival. So when you change that, some patterns need to take a little time to shake out. There's no question that having the show in spring is a much better move for the industry as a whole, and consumers will definitely respond and have, the great thing is what it means is vendors have a lot bigger portion of the year to stretch out their releases and therefore create excitement and enthusiasm amongst the consumers over a longer period of time. So in other words, you can have a late summer release, you can have an early fall, you can have a mid-fall and a winter, before the Christmas boom, all kinds of opportunities for new releases or expanded drops of limited product. It's just a much better opportunity for us. Now, let's look at numbers so far, at least here. We're I think slightly below what last year's numbers were at the midway mark, but by a really insignificant quantity. And last year was a record year. The only caveat that I have to provide as far as continuing another spectacular year for the industry is that a great, I believe that a little bit over 50% of the cigars that have been brought in here so far, again, remember, I'm speaking only about the US to date, is 50% from Nicaragua. And Nicaragua is not exactly stable right now. There are all kinds of things that could happen. Now, I know manufacturers, nobody wants to talk about this because everybody's sort of holding their breath and crossing their fingers and praying that they will get out of this troublesome phase. But that is that's a looming issue. If should supply from Nicaragua be interrupted for any reason whatsoever, it'll have an impact on sales. Now, we've got tremendous manufacturers and operators in Honduras, now in Costa Rica. So there's some places where production could shift. And, we're seeing, in my mind, a resurgence of original and creative blends from the Dominican Republic that are incorporating some Nicaraguan tobacco. So once again, there's the industry is meeting the consumer's demand for new things by being original with how they treat tobacco. And we have, again, because of, consumers don't necessarily like to hear this, price increases in cigars have ultimately meant that a portion of that money goes back to the farmers, and we are seeing better raw material than we have in a long time. I mean, that was the consequence of the initial boom of the 90s, is that enough money flooded into our business that it made its way to the guys that provide the raw material, and it changed the business. And I believe that that will continue to go forward. So I see creativity. I see greater response by manufacturers. Listen, when I started in this business, the idea that retailers, let alone consumers, could actually really affect what was being offered to them, like their demands would make a difference, was sort of laughable. The big manufacturers were like, you'll take what we make and that's it, buzz off and go back to your stores and sell this. But now the industry is far more dynamic and far more responsive, and there is a much healthier feedback loop from consumers. And Jeff's point too about where retailers are, like who might be flat and who's growing, speaks to how well they address their consumer base. How responsive are they in terms of the hospitality that they provide, how they curate their humidors, and how they educate their customers, how they reach out to them and share with them, their excitement about brands and the reasons why people should appreciate things. So as far as I'm concerned, there's this gigantic road. We have plenty of room for growth if people continue to be innovative and aggressive in courting consumers. Sorry, end of soapbox speech. I'll climb down now. Forgive me, guys. I know. There's limited time here, so I'll shut up.
George, it was fabulous and a very holistic view on things, which is greatly appreciated and fabulous. There's many things to dissect and take a deeper dive on.
Yeah.
One perspective that we're sort of missing in this picture, and I would love Jose to chime in on this, is so far we've primarily looked at the US market, whereas in your role, you have an international role to play as well, and you visit so many countries all around the world with your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry globally. How do you see what the gentleman reflected so far? How do you see that in the international markets? Is it a similar story, or would you say that given the economic situation and variances between old Europe, for example, and the US, and then of course the Middle East all the way to Southeast Asia, all being very different, do you see different dynamics panning out there?
You know, it's it's funny because I saw the Pope a couple of weeks ago. For those who don't know who the Pope is, that's Carlito's baptized name for George. Look, I agree on a lot of things that Jeff said and a lot of things that George said. But you know what a lot of people don't understand is that it's two different worlds, because you got to look at Europe in a different way. First of all, the impact of the Cubans going from 200 to 170, 170 to 140, 140 to 110, 110 to 90, 90 to 70, then 55, and maybe 45, 46 last year. First thing is that the fakes have grown in an amount of, we're estimating 14, maybe to 16 million cigars. Everybody has Cubans. When I see them and they give them to me, I say it's a fake. But let's not talk about that. What has happened in Europe? For years, and we all know it, Cuba dominated. And for years, all my friends in Europe, I said, things in Cuba every year that I go are getting worse and worse. They're not aging the tobacco. They have construction problems. They have political problems. They have all this. So what has that happened? It has given an opportunity to establish companies like us, like Davidoff, like Padron, Lito, Plasencia, Perdomo, companies that have done very well in the States. And what happens, a lot of people have tried to jump on the bandwagon, and it hasn't worked because they come in with a flash and they do this and they do that, and you see the product just sitting there. The opportunity that non-Cuban manufacturers have is to be present there. But if you think that just selling to a distributor and not being out and visiting the stores, and like what you do also, Reinhard, it's not gonna work. You have to interact with the consumers, with the distributors, with the retailers. You got to be on social media, and you have to tell why your product is just as good or better than a lot of products that our friends from the island make. So of course, you have this shortage, and you have a company that we all know, a big company that is forcing their Dominican brands and their Honduran brands down their throats, and retailers are not very happy with it. I was in Germany, and yeah, that's a good cigar, George. And Germany
You
and
know where it
Spain,
came from.
and Germany and Spain, about a month and a half I was there, they were all just shocked and said, some of them said, you know what, I just won't buy them. You know, I'll deal with the non-Cuban brands that I have. But the same thing has happened. There's been an explosion in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in India, in the Middle East. Why? Because the impact of social media, like George says, before the 80s, the 90s, you could get away with murder. Those days are over. You have to make a cigar. If it's a $5 cigar, it has to perform like a $5 cigar. If you're asking for $100, it has to perform like a $100 cigar. People will buy it once. They'll buy it twice, but they won't come back to buy it again. You know why? Because people have learned. It's not about the band or the box or the rep or the ad. It's all about the cigar. So to be honest, and deviating a little out of the what we're talking about, what shocked me, because I got it wrong last year, and a lot of us did, was to see 466 million cigars imported, and seeing the first numbers of this year has really shocked me. And every day we see on all our friends from the media a new brand, a new factory, a new line extension. At the show this year, I think it was 105 different line extensions. So what a lot of retailers telling me, and I've traveled to the States a lot this year, and I will continue to travel, is yeah, XYZ company comes in, wants to bring this in, and they tell them, okay, what do you want from your company for me to take out? Because, you know, it's real estate, and that real estate has to pay for it. So what worries me is too many line extension, too many people getting into the business. And don't get me wrong, there's people who've gotten into the business that are making fantastic cigars in the last 8, 10 years. There's people that got into business in the last couple of years that already have disappeared because it wasn't about the ad or a pretty girl or a label or a box or things like that. It's all about the product. That's my 2 cents. Maybe George and Jeff agree with me.
George, you wanted to chime in, or was that just giving your
Yeah.
blessing to what Jose said?
No. I think he's 110% correct about the people that are jumping in now, but those are natural consequences of growth, and our growth has been, it's not explosive like it was in the 90s, but it's really surprising. In other words, when you grow a market that is, in excess of 400 million by 10 or 12%, that's a whole lot different than 3% on 100 million. Right. So that tobacco has to come from somewhere. And I really applaud some of these people that are leaping into the business, that are trying to do something different, and who are admitting we're new, we're small, and we're taking a particular approach to something that we're doing, like somebody saying, we're dedicated to Connecticut tobacco or things of that nature. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What I do think is that the consumers are smarter than ever. So exactly what Jose said, which is, if you make a $5 cigar, it better be a cigar that's worth $5, because you're not going to get a chance to sell another 5 or 10 of those to the same consumer if you didn't like them. The same way that when you make a cigar that's $35 or $50 or $75, that cigar has to deliver the goods as well. And what's spectacular is that we have seen a number of people elevate their game so that they have not necessarily their entire portfolio, but they do have cigars in that range that are worth it. And consumers are responding and buying and involving themselves with that. Now, does it become their everyday cigar in most instances? Absolutely not. But the market will take care of the people that are pretenders and frauds, just like it always has. And I maintain that it's going to be faster rather than it was back at the boom of the 90s, when these guys got a year or two of a run and could deliver substandard cigars to retailers everywhere. The thing that Jose said that is absolutely spot on is, as a retailer, and I'm sure Jeff can speak to this too, very, very poignantly, I'm sure. When somebody comes in and says, this is a spectacular new product and you're crazy not to, you should get on board and introduce this to your store, the guy says, okay, come into my humidor with me and point out, because by this time, quality retailers, the inventory that they have in their humidor is largely built on relationships that they have, both with their vendors, in other words, the manufacturers of these products, with the reps that service them, and with their consumers who already appreciate these selections. So he walks in and says, point out to me what I should take away so that I can put your product in. And that's a challenge. Right now, every humidor has a few soft corners and a few products that are maybe not performing up to speed, and that have a couple of points a year, like selling double Claro cigars around St. Patrick's Day or something like that, but there's space that just isn't working. In other words, the cigars that are occupying those are not necessarily doing the proper turn in the course of a month or a quarter or a year, however a retailer tends to think of it. But it's what's good about the state of our business is that there are fewer and fewer weak sisters. There are fewer and fewer brands that are performing, that are putting stuff in just so they can occupy more space in the retailer's shelf lineup. A lot of that behavior comes from what I like to call legacy producers who are have seen their share of humidor real estate diminish in the last 15 years dramatically. Where before you would have said, hey, these top 4 or 5 giant companies with their portfolio and all kinds of stuff have 40, 50, sometimes even 60% of the space in a humidor, and now they're way, way, way down, and so they're fighting for that. But retailers know, they look and say, hey, this ain't working. people aren't buying it. They're not going for it. Now, what I don't like is to see somebody say, oh, this is a hot new brand. I'm going to take it on while there's demand. And then, 3 months later, nobody cares about it because there's 5 other things that have been popped up on TikTok and Instagram. And they go, I got to buy those. And the retailer cuts that product, discounts it and blows it out of the store. That doesn't help build a brand. That's not being a good partner to a brand, to one of your vendors. And you need to have a little bit of faith. But that same argument also pushes back against the idea that you should always be providing new things. I believe that every humidor has unloved cigars that are absolutely spectacular. And if consumers actually knew what they were, they would buy them and enjoy them, and sales would go up. But the retailer has to do the job of that, not the manufacturer and not the local rep. It's the retailer who has to tell that story and orient it to his customers. So it goes back to what Jeff was saying. If business is flat in some of these places, the retailer should be looking in the mirror, not looking at industry statistics.
Jeff, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, he's absolutely right. It does fall on the retailer. We kind of get in our comfort zone, and I know I've done it before with our favorite brands, and we tend to push the companies that we have close relationships or price protected, which is important to me, against online sales. But you still kind of have to rotate and reintroduce brands that have been around for a while that still make quality product. So, and there's room in the humidor usually to make space for something new. The boutiques are always kind of exciting, but do they have legs is ultimately the thing. There's been many brands over the years that I thought were great, and they did good for 6 months to a year, and then people just stopped buying them. But I always like to give someone, if it's a product that I think is excellent, the quality's there, the supply is there, to give them a chance. So yeah, that's part of it.
Jeff, I wanted to piggyback on what Jose mentioned. One is the introduction of new products to the market, particularly with an influx of new releases, limited editions that we saw at the trade show. And the second aspect being the price point of cigars correlated with the performance of the cigars, and whether that has reached a critical point. Just an observation, with more and more reviews that we see coming up online, it seems that there are frequent or more frequent quality issues when maybe 1 of 3 samples is not performing well, or even more than that. Is that something that you've been observing as well, just as a cigar aficionado, a connoisseur yourself, just smoking a lot of the stuff that you have at the humidor?
Yeah, I've seen, especially since COVID, with the big boom in sales, there was definitely a time period where the construction issues were there. I think it's gotten better, but I still get kind of frustrated with brands where I'm having to relight 10 times on a cigar. Ultimately, the cigar's got to smoke. I mean, that's the best thing. I mean, it can be even a mediocre cigar, but as long as it's got good construction and burns right, that should be there almost every time. I mean, you're going to get the occasional one it's a handmade product. Customers realize that, and you take care of the customer if they have one that doesn't perform right. But yeah, whether it's a $5, $15, or $50 cigar, it still needs to smoke well. So that's with cigars getting stronger, the thick oily wrapper is not placing the Ligero correctly. The market has gotten towards that stronger, bolder smoke, which inherently you might have to keep it a little bit lower humidity to smoke correctly. Whereas 20 years ago you could keep everything at 68-70%. They all smoke great. Nowadays it's certain cigars just have to be kept a little lower humidity to perform right, but you have to educate the customer on that too. So yeah.
The one aspect.
Reinhard, can I ask
please.
Jose a question related to this?
Of course.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You hear me?
International travels. Yeah, Jose, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so what you touched on the idea that there are all of these non-Cuban brands trying to penetrate markets which have traditionally been dominated by Habanos and their portfolio, and now that they're both unable to provide the volume that they used to, quality issues aside, and then pricing having exploded. So, what do you see as the success rate of these brands that are trying to crack these markets, which have heretofore been, um, you know, unreceptive to their offer in general?
Well, you got to look at it this way. And you know this just as well as I do, and I think Reinhard during the years. The United States, by far, is the largest consumers of cigars in the world. We estimate 65, 67, maybe 68% of all the cigars that are made are consumed by Americans. Then for years and years and years, Spain was the second largest consumer of premium cigars in the world. Well, guess what? Now our friends at Sprechen Sie Dutch in Germany for many, many, many years have taken over that second place in a very, very dominant way, which I think in 2022, I think it was 30% Cubans, 70% non-Cubans. And now with the problems that Germany is having, I think it's even lower. Look, the markets all have grown, and they have grown because, first, let's be honest, of the shortage, an opportunity. But when you're paying $50, $60 for a Cuban cigar, that's not going to draw. And you could get a good cigar from us, from Padron, from Ernie, Domo, Oliva, Hoya, Plasencia, for sometimes the third of a price. It's not rocket science. So remember, and this is something that I always tell people, before, if you didn't drink French wine, you were not drinking wine. Well, guess what? California is beating them, Italy, Spain, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. It's not that the French do not produce great wine, but there's other wines just as good. No cigar is better than other. It's the way you ferment, you age, and you make the cigars that makes the difference. The nitrate, the magnesium, the pH of the soil, the care, the dedication, the tradition, the love that you give to cigars. That's what makes the huge difference. And now for years, well, we had Mitchell Orchard, which we all know is Sir Mitchell Orchard when it comes to Cubans. And he said on one of the shows that right now the UK is 50-50. Who would have thought that? George, would you ever thought that the UK, which is the last stronghold of Cuban cigars in the world, right now would be 50-50? And this is not this year. It's been progressively, little by little, people just smoking different cigars and realizing that we make cigars just as good. And to be honest, right now, we make better cigars than the Cubans.
Of course. But penetrating that market, making
it seems that George left.
I think he just dropped out in the middle of his comment. Anyways, Joshua, I wanted to
technical difficulties.
And Josh, you've been patiently and quietly listening in the background. First of all, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as to what was discussed previously, primarily from your perspective as a connoisseur and as a cigar consumer, and then of course in your role with the PCA now. One crucial aspect that came up during the conversation earlier is the responsibilities and the role of the retailers in terms of helping the consumers, taking them on the journey, you know, taking them a step further on their cigar journey. I know that you have implemented ideas and concepts to educate the cigar community, also partially at the trade show. What do you think we can do better as an industry as a whole in terms of educating our consumers, but also helping our retailers in being even better retailers?
Yeah, I think looking at the education piece, you would have a much more sophisticated consumer by and large, but they're coming at it from different vehicles. I think that you look at the US market in particular, you are seeing growth not only in the number of imports, but where people can buy cigars. We are getting an onslaught of new members, new retail lounges, new cigar bars. Also, a lot of our retailers are opening up wholesale businesses to service places like golf course, distilleries, wineries, gun ranges, you name it. So, people are kind of getting introduced to cigars maybe as a secondary activity, with some other type of enjoyment or other passion of theirs. So I think it's people that are coming from those verticals need to get immersed and come to the retail shops after they might buy a cigar in a small pop-up humidor at a golf course, and get the education from places like Jeff's shop. But we're also seeing the growth on the manufacturing side. I know that Jose and George mentioned this. Last month in June, we signed up 12 new exhibitors for next year's trade show. So there are new brands, new companies. We are in a cigar mini boom still. It's continuing. The numbers suggest that. And we are seeing it across the board from the retail and manufacturer. And I think part of this, to bring it all back a little bit, the Cigar Rights of America, the PCA, and the CAA, the associations out there, we've been fighting a lot of battles, whether it be the states or the courts. Licensing, cigar bar licensing in Connecticut, you can have new licenses to open up, a place where you can enjoy a beverage and a cigar indoors. Things like that, making it easier to set up these new small businesses. Now you're starting to see those returns actually come into play. And then, of course, like the big ticket item, the court cases, the 3 lawsuits against the Food and Drug Administration, 4 or 5 years ago, coming into this business, it may have been a bad bet. You had a lot of people looking at it as, all right, the sky's falling, the government's coming after me. Should I invest my money in that? And right now we have relative regulatory certainty. Things like the overturning of Chevron in the US with the Supreme Court, that only helps solidify future actions. So, certainly there's some states that are outliers, like Massachusetts with the generational smoking bans, but all that policy is really doing is helping the New Hampshire cigar market. So, by and large, you're seeing a lot of growth across the board. And I think some of it is part because of that regulatory certainty and, the actions that the government has not been able to do, because you have these associations and organizations fighting for consumers, retailers, and manufacturers.
Maybe just a follow-up question on the educational component. Do you have any plans or strategies that you would like to implement during your next couple of months, sort of the months leading up to next year's trade show? A couple of plans or visions that you have on your agenda, which you could possibly share with us, especially when it comes to the educational component and offering new programs even, or initiatives for the retailers.
So right now we're focusing a lot on showcasing excellence, whether it be through awards, through documentaries, through highlighting successful retailers, lounges, making sure that, when you see somebody doing something exemplary, they're recognized, and those best practices can be shared and they become ubiquitous. We're hosting different forums at a smaller level, and getting the trade show out, that's only part of the piece of networking and making sure that, we highlight the best of the best, and sharing those best practices, but kind of having a year-round calendar, working on some partnerships. We recently had a forum of 40 female retailers here in Washington, D.C. They had the opportunity to share, best practices, things that have made them successful in this industry. So we're looking to do more of that. We've partnered with the folks with Handrolled on highlighting Jeff Borshowitz, and we showed that preview at the trade show. I think there'll be some more of those kind of documentary styles. Look, education and learning in today's day and age is done mainly through experiential, interactive forums. So, the ways that we can do that and tap into it. The other thing in my leadership with PCA, I intend to partner with people that are doing it right. I mean, we have an existing partnership with Tobacconist University. We plan on promoting that even further. But we don't have to invent everything new and do it ourselves and become a competitor to some of the things that are already out there. So I think one of the things that we're looking at is, what is available in the education suite for tobacconists. Our core audience is retail first and foremost, and then our associate members that are manufacturers. And then it goes down even further to consumers. So how do we target those audiences with the right information? Having come from the advocacy government affairs realm, which isn't the always the most lively topic or the most interesting. People really want to hear about the stories, the history, the tradition that Jose talked about, the personalities, the tobaccos, the blends, the packaging, that type of stuff. So we're trying to integrate all of that because advocacy is a key component. But how do we holistically package these information pieces to our different audiences?
Thank you very much, Joshua. Great to hear. George, you sort of dropped out during your last statement. So jump back on and please continue your thoughts if you can hear us and if you would like to chime back in. And if George is just quietly listening in the background, then I'll hand over the microphone to Jose yet again, and let's hear back from Jose on what Joshua just shared with us.
No, I agree with Joshua, and if Joshua remembers, I think one of the things that kicked off was the idea that I proposed to Scott and at that time to Greg Zimmerman when we were trying to really, through our show and every podcast we were on, for retailers to come and support and explaining to retailers that the show is not about deals. The show is about supporting the PCA. It's about supporting the CRA. But more than anything else, is to meet with fellow retailers. And I always tell the guys from the East, forget about the guys from the East or the states close. Talk to somebody's in the Midwest or somebody's in California or somebody's in Texas and see what's working there. So just don't hang out. And I tell them when I see the same crowds from the same state sometime hanging out, I said, you knuckleheads, you're together drinking on the weekends. You're together selling cigars. You're 3 miles apart and you're going to come to the show and you're going to hang out. No, spread it out and ask a fellow retailer that you've never met in your life, what's working for you and your state? What doesn't work? how you dealing with taxes, how you doing with events, what's selling, what's not selling. So going back to what I said, one of the things that I said to Carlito, we have to make this show a show that's going to be memorable. I have an idea. I want you to make a cigar, especially, but it'll only be smoked at the convention. And even though I had, when I was with La Aurora, a seminar with about 310 people, it's the biggest seminar ever done in all the years of RTDA, IPCPR, and PCA. More than 550 people were there. They loved it. They enjoyed it. It was informative. So going to what Joshua is talking about, I can guarantee you that people love to see panels with expert. Carlito, myself, Jorge, Nestor Andres, Lito, all the guys that make great cigars. People want to hear stories, and you let the audience Q&A you. People will show up for that. And the educational part, I've known Jorge Armenteros for years. I think he's one of the most knowledgeable guys. When he was working on the book, I was at La Aurora. You see the first book? Majority of photos are from rollers from La Aurora, farms that I took him to. He's passionate about it, but he's a person that the knowledge that he has, he wants to bring it on to retailers. The problem is, to be honest, there's a lot of retailers that are still in the past. They don't want to have a Facebook page. They don't want to be on Instagram. They don't want to do events. You walk into the store, they have a rug that I've seen it for 20 years where you could grow corn on it. The humidor, you think there's a rat inside. Those days are over. All the shops that I've been seeing in the last 2.5 years in the States are amazing. I've maybe run into 1 or 2 shops that I asked myself in the rep, how can they still be around? Well, they're the only game in town. So they're like Jeff said, and I want to hear Jeff's thoughts on this, because I know how Jeff does his events, how passionate he is about it. But I think those days of, buy 2, get 1 free, chips and popcorn and soda, those days are over. The consumer doesn't want that. I've told a lot of retailers, it's better not to do anything. Instead of trying to do events every 2 weeks, try to do during the year 10 good events. Because what you're doing, if you do an event every 2 weeks and you get some guy that's giving a buy 2, get 1 free, or buy 3 boxes, get 1 free, that's 80 cigars the guy has to smoke before he gets it. So I think that part of what the retailers have to do now is smarten up a little, because I tell people, no deal is good if you can't sell it. I would like to hear something from my good friend Jeff that I really do like a lot.
Thanks, Jose. Yeah, events are definitely tricky, and I do a lot of events. So I'm 10 to 14 events a year, typically, our monthly cigar promo with a feature vendor. And sometimes they're really, really good, and sometimes they're okay. Customers can't always make every one, so you might not hit them that month, but they might come the next month. The deals, the swag is becoming, I think, problematic. Everyone's got travel cases and lighters and cutters, so that's not as important to most consumers nowadays. But doing unique events, we just did our last week, I want to say, 8th or 9th Smokes and Jokes, where we do a comedy fest. And this is, like I said, 8th or 9th year. It's just something fun. It's not a money-making event. It's just something fun that we enjoy, that the customers love. So, we do a ticket. It comes with a couple of cigars. We feature a company. It comes with a couple of beers. We have 3 or 4 comedians, and we shut down the bar just for ticket holders for a few hours, and it's just fun. Or long ash competition we started a couple of years ago, and give them a trophy and have a plaque on the wall, cigar dinners, things like that. And they don't have to be big events. You can do just a smaller cut and light, and let the rep work their magic and introduce the customers to the brand, that maybe it's a smaller brand that's got a smaller footprint in your humidor, but makes great cigars. So they don't always have to be gigantic events, but you also have to, as a retailer, be smart with the events that you choose, because if you have leftover product, it needs to be stuff that moves. So I don't mind if it's a medium-sized event as far as sales, but I'm going to turn that stuff in the next month or two, that's fine. So, there's pros and cons to the constant events. And I can definitely see where, stores just doing 2, 3, 4 big events a year. If that works for them, great. So, every store is different, especially when you have a lot of stores in towns constantly doing events, you have to be smart with how you do it. But also I found, on the other hand, I think when people have more cigars, they smoke more cigars. So, I think it's better personally to have the events and the opportunities for people. And if they want to take advantage of it, great.
Jeff, you just made me think of one aspect, and I think it's probably worth sharing and discussing. Uh, the question mark for me is what's the intention of the event also, right? Because we were talking about the educational component just a second ago. And I think to do events more frequently with less of an entry barrier, whether it's in terms of the look and feel of the event, and of course also the price point, that's where introducing new audiences and newer consumers to cigars and really go deep on the educational component. Whereas if you look at some of the stuff that Mike Cavagno is doing in Greenwich, like the huge Davidoff events that he used to pull up, or now the sensational Fuente event where huge amounts of money for charity are being raised. You have a couple hundred people there with supercars, live music, exceptional food. I think that's less about the educational component, but it's a stunning happening that has a relatively wide span in terms of reaching out to people, but there's guys from all over the US flying to Greenwich specifically for that. So it brings me back to my point of I think it has a lot to do with what do you actually try to achieve with the event? Is it a one big bang where you want to collect money for charity? Is it an event because you need to get rid of certain things and you're trying to clear the humidor a little bit, or is it something that you offer frequently, like what Ray does in the UK on a almost weekly basis, I want to say, where he really brings new people to the cigar culture and to cigar enjoyment, and it's a lot about the educational side of things. And I mean, nobody better to talk about this than George Brightman, who's in charge of hosting fabulous events at Capital Cigar in Bethesda, and I've had the privilege of sitting at a couple of them together with him. So, George, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, you're exactly right that you have to evaluate events based on what's their intent. What is the reason to do it? Is it to launch something new? Is it simply to move inventory? Is it to create a celebratory mood and reinforce the sense of community that your customer base has? And don't forget, you need not to have your reach exceed your capability. So the idea that a small shop that might be newer in the environment is going to try and host a golf tournament or a major dinner or a huge charity event could be a challenge for them, and they could be disappointed by the results. So you have to make your goals clear in the beginning, and don't forget, you have to be able to clearly communicate that to the consumer that you expect to respond, right? In other words, the reason for being present at an event should be part and parcel of the announcement of the event and the invitation that you extend to consumers. Come and meet so-and-so. You've never seen him before, and he's going to give you the inside scoop on this brand, whether it's new or old. Like, listen, there's nobody that doesn't want to come out and hear Jose talk about his business, his experience in the industry, the manufacturers, and in particular, if you add in that he's talking about something like Fuente and that portfolio, it's a customer magnet, and you're going to be overwhelmed. But there are smaller brands that still have a story to tell, and that might be new or that might be trying something new. They deserve their time in the sun as well, but you have to frame them differently. And everything, your success depends on how you present it to the consumer. So that, by the way, think about it. What Jeff was saying is that he does like 14 events in a year, and I'm sure that they are different in scale. In other words, some of them are designed to be blockbusters that are unforgettable, and others are more the equivalent of a pop-up event where you have a rep come in and talk about the product. But if you don't make that clear, then you have somebody that walks in and they don't understand the proposition. Oh, who cares if I got a couple cigars and you're giving me, snacks or something like that? That's not good enough, right? For the reason that they came out. So I always try and make sure that we have a value add to the proposition. Either you're going to have access to really, really unique product, merchandise, like Simpuente, like Marifel, various exotic things that are there. We've had great success with special tatuaje product that's maybe only available once a year, and the people come out. It's extraordinary. But I also try and give them, by way of doing my Q&As, I try and give them access to somebody in the industry with vast knowledge and the ability to share it. Jose is really, really entertaining in the way that he talks about it. We have a handful of rock stars in our industry who are really, really good at entertaining the consumers. They understand why people are there and they engage with them. And there are other guys that are stiffs, they're just not good. They're like, well, it's the second priming of, this crop, and they don't appreciate that the consumer is there as much to be entertained as educated. So if you don't fold that in, if you don't fold some exciting reason to be there, either the ability to get new product or to get new information or to experience this magnificent party, in other words, don't forget that the vibe that attracts people and makes them talk about it and other people go, oh my God, I have to be there the next time they have it, is that the entire event was so entertaining that they got multiple benefits out of it, not just product or a price. Like anybody that thinks that the advantage to doing an event is buy 3 get 2 free or a special price on a box of cigars, they're missing the point. And as Jose said, if you load a guy up with cigars at an event in March and he goes away with 70 or 80 cigars and you don't see him for 3 months, did you really win? That's no good. It's not about that. What the guy should be saying is, I can't wait till the next time these guys have a party like that so I can go and enjoy myself, but also learn something. I can find out something about my favorite cigar. And that's what the right guys in this business understand, that they have an aspect of storytelling in why they're there in a shop, and what they have to say about a particular brand that makes people go away with a story that they can repeat in other environments. And it's what you've done is strengthen their bond to a brand or a company, and in so doing also obviously strengthen their relationship with the retailer who hosted that and said, oh yeah, man, that's the place to be. These are the guys that do it right.
George, I would like to use the opportunity to ask you not only to look back at what happened during the first half of the year, but also to start looking ahead a little bit as to the remainder of the year, Q3 and Q4. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to, or other certain things that have you worried, where you think we should be a little cautious as to how we move forward as an industry, leading into the second half of the year now?
Well, first, as an industry, we should never take a legislative victory for not to cast doubt on the things that Josh was talking about and the tremendous accomplishments that CRA has made this year and in recent years. The health Nazis and the anti-smoke people who try bans and taxes to diminish our reach are never going away. These people are not going to give up, and we see them. It's not just here in the United States. They're we know that the EU ban dramatically affected business for a while, and people had to figure out, how to get around it. So never take for granted that things are safe and that we're okay and that it's, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Because no matter how good we come out in terms of an FDA or a government ruling, no victory is permanent. So we all need to be cautious about that. And that means also not celebrating. I'm telling you now, because I witnessed it, some people blame me for it, but the boom of the 90s is one of the things that led to tax increases and smoking bans. People saw the popularity of cigar smoking rising, and they said, we got to do something about this. And we got to cripple these guys' ability to get out there and be visible. Now, as far as the rest of this year, immediately here in these markets, I only see increased opportunity. In other words, I don't see any reason, I don't see any catastrophe lurking that outside of what I pointed out before about troubles in cigar producing countries. Listen, we should all be paranoid about the fact that hurricane season is starting early. As these things become more prevalent and more damaging, we have to worry about what they do to tobacco producing countries. And it isn't always just about what happens to the fields. It's the bars and it's the homes of the people who work in these industries. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to take care of these people in a way that perhaps people haven't thought about before. But my feeling is that there are more and more good retailers out there. There are more and more lounges which are specifically engineered to provide an extraordinary experience for consumers. So people are going to take advantage of that. They're going to respond. If you give them a great place to go and smoke cigars and meet their friends and hear from the heroes of the industry, having Jose drop in to your store, having Lito Gomez drop in your store, having Pete Johnson come in your store. These are all things that are, extraordinary events, and consumers can't resist. It's like catnip. So I believe that there is more and more opportunity for us to keep the consumer's enthusiasm about the extraordinary array of cigars. I mean, listen, as anybody in the business can tell you, when we talk about, needing to sort out what's for sale and what isn't, and if you buy a new brand, there is an unbelievable array of great cigars available for a smart consumer now. And it doesn't matter what level, you can be the biggest cigar snob in the world and I only smoke XYZ, or you could be, Joe Sixpack. They have great choices in front of them. So it's a retailer's job to make sure that they have a blend of that product and that they have staff who are dedicated to sharing that information with the customer, no matter who he is. It can be a newbie. To me, the greatest thing in the world is for a cigar store to have somebody come in and go, wow, I've never been here before. This is cool. What's going on? What's in the humidor, and how can I hang out in the lounge, and who am I going to meet? Those things are, getting a new person in that mix is the greatest thing in the world. And I believe that, Josh referred to the idea of secondary places. In other words, people discovering the joys of cigar smoking in a non-traditional environment, not a cigar store, but in another capacity. More and more of those opportunities should be fostered, and retailers should be looking for the ways that they can present cigars outside of their normal theater of operations. Because when you have that, you have the ability, sure, 80% of the people that are there could be your most dedicated and most loyal customers, but they bring friends, and their friends invite friends. And so the circle widens, and we need to be able to take advantage of that. And if you're not actively searching not only for those opportunities, but to make connections with the people who come there. In other words, you've got to be reaching out. You've got to, like having an event and there's a big crowd that's there and all you're doing is banging the cash register. If you're not working your customer base, if you're not working the crowd that shows up, you're losing your opportunity. Sorry, did that answer your question, or did I just wander off?
It gave a lot of wonderful insights and thoughts to chew on. And I would love Joshua to chew on that a little bit together with us, piggybacking on what George said. And also, Joshua, maybe you can say a few words about the decision to overturn Chevron deference, and how that ties in with all the other stuff that's pending and happening on the legal and regulatory front, just so we can tie that in with our little outlook into the remainder of the year, please.
Why is
Yeah,
it good news?
yeah, I think it's really good news because it's going to make the FDA's job a whole lot more difficult when it comes to issuing regulations. And this has the effect on ones that are pending regulations, as well as future ones that, they haven't even concocted up to this point. So, things like the manufacturing product standards that we've rallied against, that I know CRA has also rallied against, that it becomes the analysis and the requirements for FDA to do something have become tenfold more difficult. They have to show congressional intent in order to promulgate a rule. So, that's a good thing for, the future. It kind of inhibits their ability to do that. But in striking down what the Chevron deference rule was, something's going to have to replace that. And what is that replacement? I think that's the burning question that a lot of us are asking. I talked with our regulatory counsel about the decision, and as we are on the premium cigar deeming rule, the FDA is appealing that. They expect oral arguments to take place in October in that case, could be a little bit later. But that was a challenge to the Administrative Procedures Act. That's not necessarily 100% an overlay with Chevron. So this is more for future regulations that the FDA would come up with. That's why it's such a positive development for the industry. But, to George's point, I mean, we have to be vigilant when something can't get done at the federal level. These anti-tobacco groups just looked at, the next thing. And right now, Glenn Loop and we're spending a lot of our time trying to figure out Massachusetts and these generational smoking bans and these, the historic shops around Boston. I think it's insane when you think about July 4th and Independence Day and the freedoms and the Americana and American spirit. The neighborhoods where liberty was founded in this country, outside of Boston, Massachusetts, Concord is considering a generational smoking ban, which is completely anti-freedom, anti-adult choice. And it's, unelected bureaucrats dictating social goals through complete fiat. I know that's a little bit of a word twister there, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where in government affairs in the tobacco space, I've learned that it's whack-a-mole. You score some points here, but another thing pops up. So you have to keep beating the drum. You have to keep supporting the organizations. Now, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I do believe that this summer and this year is still going to be strong for the cigar industry. I think that, a lot of companies are doing road shows, a lot of events are taking place. You have a lot of new releases. I'm noticing that a lot of cigars orders that were placed at the trade show, some of them are shipping and hitting the shelves now. So it's kind of a slow burn where you're seeing consumer activity pick up. I know Jeff pointed out early on in the conversation, you do have sporadic pockets where their sales haven't been as strong as other areas, but the feedback that I've gotten, nationally has been still very positive. you're seeing the introduction of a lot of the and George and Jose and Jeff talked about it. Different events. We're seeing a lot more larger scale events, community events that are, a lot of times a tie into a charity or another type of activity. So I think that the consumers that were gained over the COVID period that may have been more of a bourbon enthusiast and just happened to get into cigars, that conversion, I think, is solidified. A lot of that estimated 300 to 400,000 new consumers, adult consumers, in the US, I think a lot of them decide to stick with cigar, consumption, even if it's your average consumer, which statistically is less than 2 cigars a month. Now, before 9 a.m., I had 2 cigars. So I know a lot of people on this call are outliers, but I think that those demographics and that group is still holding strong. So hopefully we see the sales continue to climb.
Allow me a follow-up question, please, on the international aspect. You and I, we've had the pleasure of over the last couple of years talking about the international aspect repeatedly, trying to build bridges transatlantically, and the Premium Cigar Association has been much more adamant recently about venturing out into the international markets as well, which is applaudable. I just came from the Netherlands, where plain packaging is a Damocles sword over everybody's head. I've just made my way to Belgium, where the situation is just horrifying, really, to say the least, as to what's happening. So, as much as I cherish and champion and applaud the success in the United States, what do you see as a strategy moving forward on some of these very very challenging and very dire international situations? And in the next couple of months, what are some plans and targets as to continue building those international relationships and helping the international markets in their regulatory fights as well?
So, I keep in regular contact with Paul Varakis with ECMA. He does a really good job taking the lead in Europe. We are, fortunately, the industry, CRA, PCA, the trade groups have paid for a lot of these studies, this research. And every time we notch up a victory, that's another fact or anecdote or bullet point that can be used universally throughout the world. So, we continue to provide support documents. We keep filing. I don't know that a lot of the European Union might not necessarily be listening to a Washington, D.C. based trade association, but we still are putting our message out there. I will be at this year's Intertabac giving a presentation on U.S. regulatory and legislative development and how that affects the world. So, we're going to kind of go in short presentation on some of those best practices, some of those studies that might be able to be utilized in other areas, but certainly a challenging situations. But you're seeing a lot of electoral changes, and in some of those changes, you have bad policy that gets overturned. And I think on the pro side, we have the opportunity to overturn things. But, to George's point, we have to be careful some of these good things don't get overturned themselves on our end. But I'll give you a case in point example. New Zealand, created the generational smoking ban. New party came into power and it was reversed immediately. They had a crazy policy of downsizing their retail, small business tobacconists by 95%. That was overturned. So, it can be very daunting and challenging. We've been there in the U.S. We have obviously a market leader in consumption and import, and a lot of the businesses headquartered there, and we plan on carrying our weight and utilizing that big big stick mentality and going out there and shining light on the pros of this industry in all of those available forums. So, we'll continue and engage. We'll work with the country specific and groups that are in Europe. Paul has a much better understanding of the European system. We like to joke some of the stuff that we do in the US is actually illegal in the Netherlands to do on the lobbying perspective. So it's we kind of stay in our lane in that and try and be as helpful as we can, knowing the customs and cultures and rules and regulations are very different.
Much appreciated.
Reinhard.
George, please.
Josh, I want to suggest that the PCA undertake a publicity campaign where you encourage people in Massachusetts to go to New Hampshire to have their kids. So the generational smoking ban won't apply to them.
So I actually have been toying around with the idea with Glenn. I mentioned Connecticut, not too far from Massachusetts, doing a trip up to the first cigar lounge or cigar bar that was granted the license after the new law that was passed, that we helped usher through. But in that trip, kind of coordinating it against one of these public health board meetings and doing a good old fashioned smoke out protest. In front of it, because they need a reality check in Massachusetts that there are adults can make decisions, and a lot of the arguments here, it's not cigars are important, but the policies are being crafted with vape and other oral nicotine. It's nicotine bans. It really isn't even smoking. The goalposts have moved from product types of cigarettes to smoking to now all nicotine. And a lot of people are saying, what's next? Are you going for gambling, big sodas, alcohol? At a certain point, people want to be able to make decisions for themselves and what they decide to buy and consume and enjoy in their free time. And I think that's where the libertarianism kind of kicks in this industry of like, what, let us make our own decision and willingly go in there. If you don't like smoking, don't go to a cigar lounge, don't go to a cigar bar, plain and simple.
Your words.
Now I'm on a soapbox. See, George, you're influencing me there.
Guilty as charged.
I was going to say, I think one thing on the legislative side that I have noticed, and I think people are getting better, is that there's too many stores that are just reactive instead of being proactive. For years, we in Oklahoma, we're fortunate to have preemption. We're one of the few states that still have that, that safety net where local municipalities cannot enforce a stricter law than what the state says. And they tried to do away with that many, many years ago, and we were able to defeat it. But every January, February, I get on our state site and I do a word search through every new bill that's being introduced and look for smoking, taxes, tobacco, and I read through every bill and look for anything that might be a pop-up surprise, because you can't depend on PCA, CRA to do everything. The retailers have to be active in researching and helping out and educating the customers to do their part, whether it's through phone calls, emails, visits to their representatives, and then also educating the customers on how to do it correctly. There's too many times. I can remember sitting in a meeting with the second guy. He was the one sponsoring the bill, second most powerful man in the House for the state, and it was his final year, and this was his swan song bill. But we were sitting in a meeting with him, and the first thing he did is he went to his computer and played back a voice message from a person that basically was cussing him out. How dare you do this? And it put us on we had to apologize. This is not how the average cigar consumer is, but educating people on the correct way to do it. Because unfortunately, a lot of these people don't read the bills. They don't know what's in there. They don't know what's going to hurt. They don't know the number of retailers and the employees or even the tax revenue that it brings to the state. So properly educating people on how to approach their legislative person with respect and educate them goes a lot further than just flying off the cuff and insulting them. So retailers really have to step up every state and keep an eye on stuff, because if you don't, that's when it comes back and bites you.
Jeff, I applaud every single word you said, and I wholeheartedly support and truly appreciate it. I would like to add to that the responsibility, in my humble opinion, also extends to every single cigar enthusiast, consumer, anybody out there who spends some of his hard-earned money on a premium cigar every now and then and has an organization close to where he or she lives and is not a member. Sign up today, whether it's Cigar Rights of America, whether it's Cigar Rights of Europe, or the many subchapters therein. Most of the time, the membership is probably the equivalent of one or two premium cigars that you're enjoying and consuming regularly. So please support these causes and support these organizations. And even if you're lazy and you don't care, all it takes is a signature or putting your name on a list, and then maybe putting your membership fees due. But stand up, because oftentimes we realize that shit had hit the fan and then it's way too late. So as you said, and again, kudos to the proactive approach that also extends to every single one who enjoys premium cigars on a regular basis. Get up from your asses and do something, and even if it's only signing up to one of these organizations and become a member to support that very important fight.
And
Jeff,
as a consumer, when you go in these lounges and stores, make sure that they're members of PCA. Don't support the ones that are like, I don't need to do that. Other people are doing it, man. They need to be signed up. They need to be a part. They need to be supporting what PCA does on all of our behalf.
Amen, George.
And the same thing is true for CRA membership.
Jeff,
It's inexcusable. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, please, George.
No, it's just when these institutions exist to advocate on our behalf so that we can continue to enjoy these great cigars that are out there today, something as simple as signing up for a membership, which comes with benefits anyway. It's crazy not to do it. You should be, everybody, every institution that is in the business of purveying tobacco products should be a member of PCA. And as a consumer, if you're not a member of CRA, you're doing a disservice to yourself, and you're helping the factors, the overlords that are trying to drive us out of business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling that people are not members of PCA. I mean, you're talking about the cost of 3 or 4 boxes of an order. I mean, that's nothing for a single store. And as the last few years, the PCA has expanded the member benefits greatly and continue to do so. I've seen it being on a couple of committees, and I'm excited for the future. I mean, the PCA has really been on a great course the last several years, and Josh is going to continue that, and we're going to achieve new heights. But I'm excited for the new benefits that are coming up, and the extra value that the stores need to take advantage of. And there's been a lot of hard work put into the retirement plans and things like that. Gimbel's been there for several years, the texting plan. So look into those and take advantage of what's being offered. I mean, you're getting more return for such a tiny investment besides just access to a trade show. There's so much more.
Right.
I greatly appreciate the kind words and support for the organization. Know that I'm, accessible. And if you have ideas, questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on our team. I'm actually headed into one of those member benefit meetings now, so I'm going to have to sign off, but I appreciate the time and the invitation to take part in this session, and wish all of you very well, and hopefully get to enjoy some cigars. I'm going to be smoking cigars in honor of Independence Day tomorrow, pretty much all day. So get to enjoy my fair share.
Here, here, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
See you at the end of the month.
Jeff, since we had you on the mic just a second ago and sort of wrapping up the regulatory and legal aspect anyways, let's, before we wrap things up, also conclude with your outlook and your perspective for the remainder of the year. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to? Some of the stuff that you can maybe share with us from Tulsa that you have in store and that you have planned. And yeah, just a little bit of a glimpse into the crystal ball, as I like to say.
Just, looking forward to continuing to grow business and build relationships. I mean, that's ultimately the business. There's a reason so many of us get into it and stay, because it's the best job in the world. Your customers become your family, your best friends. They're who you hang out with. It's a melting pot that there's no other industry, I think, on earth that can give you that feeling. So continuing to do great business and take care of people, that's the ultimate goal. So I think with the wins on the legislative side and continuing to push, the truth, basically, I think there's a lot to look forward to. Great cigars coming out, manufacturers doing unique things. So yeah, I think we're in a very positive situation right now, and let's just keep it going.
Well, Professor, I think we're getting to the point where it's about time to, conclude this session and wrap up class. So,
a lot of interesting things from Jeff, from George, and also from Joshua. What worries me, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that worry me. I think right now in the United States, because of the PCA, especially for the role, the job, the hard work that the CRA has done, we're in better shape. I was in Spain about 6 weeks ago, and a friend of mine was fined 12,000 euros because Logista found a photo that he put up 3 years ago. So the fines are 2,000 euros, 3,000 euros, 7,000 euros. So right now, the majority of the stores and the guys that work in different companies are not on social media. We could tag them, and they're not held responsible. You know what's happening in Belgium. You know what they're trying to do in the UK. So if you look at it, I think that our industry in Europe is in more of a risk by far than what's happening in the States. What I'm seeing is I hope we continue with the growth. It worries me that a lot of people don't take shortcuts on fermented tobacco, cigars that don't draw well, that don't burn well, that canoe, that have issues. We saw that. We've heard it on some shows we've been. We never mentioned companies. And what I could tell to the guy who's been around 30, 40, 50 years, or it's been around for a couple of years, continue to bring out the products when the products are ready. What has amazed me in these 2.5 years traveling is the amount of new shops, new lounges, and the knowledge behind these stores. I was in Virginia when I spent time with George, and I saw a lot of shops in Virginia, I saw a lot of shops in DC, I saw a lot of shops in Maryland, and I was surprised interacting with the staff. It's not that they knew me or things like that. It's the questions they asked me about tobacco and what's the difference between a Corojo 90, Corojo 99 and a Corojo 98, and who was the person that created that and why were these two seeds grown. So there was a lot of people And it wasn't necessarily 25 or 30-year-old. Shops that brought in a guy that retired and now he's working at the age of 55 because he loves cigars. So what I've seen is a lot of shops, a lot of knowledge, a lot of customer service. Those stores that we used to go that everything was a mess, of course you see one, but you see one after you've seen 20 great shops. Everything organized, everybody very well dressed, the ashtrays are clean, the humidor smells good. So that encourages people to grow the business. But I could tell you, those days of you having shitty customer service, having dried up cigars, having a rug with more dirt than a farm, and a humidor that smells like there's a rat dead, those days are over. And some of them are still around because they're maybe the only shop in a radius of 30 or 40 miles. But right now, the guys that are doing it right are making money. They're bringing in new people. They're educating them, and they're making a base of consumers that's going to withhold time and support the stores. That's my 2 cents.
What a beautiful and spectacular way to wrap up today's show. What a pleasure to have had such an incredible panel. I want to thank Joshua Habursky, Jeff, George Brightman, the professor. Thank you very much for your participation, for your knowledge, your expertise, and your wonderful insights. I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you back here live at the Light 'em Up Lounge next week, same time, same station. That's a wrap for today. Thank you all, and light 'em up until next week. Cheers,
Thanks,
everybody.
Reinhard.
Good night.
Thanks very
Thanks,
much.
Reinhard.
Thank you.
Jeff, I'm going to see if next year I can make it up your way.
I would love to have you back. It's been too many years. I know
I
the
know, and
customers
you-
would love to see you.